These are the list of all of the functions and formulae that you can be asked when working in Excel. And we're just going to work through all of them from the very basic to the more complicated in this little video. So we'll start with basic arithmetic and then sum, average, min and max. Basic arithmetic basically means that you don't actually have to use any brackets. So this is the difference between a function and a formulae. A formulae does not require brackets. It can simply say equals C4 plus E4, and it will add them up. There is no instruction, there's no word, there's no coding in it. It's just a sum. That's it. I can do that with adding, taking away. I can also do it with divide and times. And divide and times, the symbols are / to divide and the asterisk to times. So, basic formulae, basic functions. Function to find the highest score, lowest, total and average are your most simple of the functions. Equals max finds the highest score in a range. Equals min finds the lowest score in a range. Equals sum will add up the scores in a range. And equals average will find the average score in a range, like so. So all of these are our most basic systems, and they will usually come up in most exam papers, but they're not going to be worth a huge amount of marks. Let's move on to some more complicated ones. So then we have the count and the count A. Now, count and count A is not about adding the set of numbers, it's about actually counting how many cells or how many items are in a range. Count will count just the numerical values. It ignores everything else. It ignores text, it ignores blank cells. So count will only count the numbers, the actual numbers that are in a range. Whereas count A will count everything in a range. It will count everything including text. So regardless what's in the range, it will count all of the items. Let's have a look. So if I go to this example here, in this test, James was off ill, so he doesn't have a result. So if I wanted to count the number of students who actually took the test, I can write equals count, open brackets, select my range, close, and this count will ignore that value there, because that's text, and this count will only count the numeric values. So it returns 4 students. Whereas if I wanted to count all of the values in a range, I could write count A. And count A will count everything, numbers and text. So now it returns 5 values. Count and count A. So after count and count A, we have int and we have round. Int stands for integer, meaning a whole number, and round is for rounding up or rounding down. So this is about decimal places. Now, you can format cells with their decimal places. You can change the way a cell is shown for decimal places. However, if you use the formula for int and round, what it does is it ensures that the actual data is then used in the next formula. So if you wanted to then calculate that number, for example, if you've calculated something as an integer, it will completely disregard the hidden decimal places. Whereas if I use the decimal formula up here to take away the decimal places, those decimals are still in part of the number. They're still there, they're just not visible. So when you calculate on that cell, it calculates including the decimal values. And that's why sometimes we require the int or the round formula. So let's imagine I wanted to find the average of this range of cells. Average, and I select my range, and I have an average with 3 decimal places. Now, if I want to make this into a whole number, an integer, I've got 2 options. Number 1, I could do it separately from the original formula. I could go next door to that cell and I could simply type in equals int, that cell there, close. And what it will do is it will find the integer of that value. What I can also do is I can actually add the integer into the instruction, into my average instruction. So I can say equals integer of the average. So I can say equals int, open brackets, average A2 to A9, close brackets. And what this is now saying is it is an integer, it's an integer of the average. So I don't have to do it separately. I can do it all in one formula. And that will also find the result. If I take that away, let's have a look at the exact same example for rounding. So in my cell here to the right, I can say equals round. And round requires two things. The number that you want to round and how many digits you want to round it to, how many decimal places. So if I want to round that cell there, comma, to 1 decimal place, I can. Or to 2 decimal places, I can as well. Now again, as with the integer, I can also put that instruction into this formula here. I can say equals round the average A2 to A9, and then in between that and the close brackets, I can say how many decimal places I want to round it to. I want to round it to 1 decimal place. Let's have a look. What have we done? An extra bracket, I think, was the problem. Equals round the average of this to 1 decimal places. Yeah, that's right. That's the correct number of decimal places now. There we go. So our round calculation and our int calculation can be added into any function. This could be the round of a set of numbers being added together, or a set of numbers being taken away, or as I say, a maximum or a minimum, or whichever else. Okay, you can add the round or the int number or instruction before the previous one. Let's have a look at our slightly more complicated formulas, these last ones. VLOOKUP, count if, sum if, nested if, and an or if. So we'll start with the VLOOKUP. Usually the VLOOKUP is finding a range of cells and it's saying, for example, compare this exact piece of data with this exact piece of data and bring me back the corresponding value. Every now and again you come across one that's not an exact piece of data like this. This is within a range of cells. This student scored a 9 on her test, so what grade does she get? But the number 9 doesn't appear exactly in this column. It's somewhere between 8 and 10. She didn't get a 10, so she can't have an A, but she got between 8 and 10, so she should get a B. But 8 corresponds to B, and she got a 9. So how does it do that? So this is a VLOOKUP. If you are using exact numbers, then you have what's called a false range or a false lookup. When you're looking for within a range, you have a true lookup. So let's try this. Equals VLOOKUP. It needs 3 pieces of data. The lookup value is always one single cell, never a range. Okay, I look up one cell at a time. So I'm going to look up cell C4, comma. The table array is where am I looking it up? If you're clicking and dragging a table array in the same spreadsheet, you need to make sure that you lock it in place with dollar symbols, the absolute cell referencing, to ensure that that table array doesn't move when you drag the results of your VLOOKUP down. But if you pull your table array in from another spreadsheet, which is usually the case, it will automatically lock that in place, like so. Comma, the next element is the column index number. This tells me from which column am I returning data, column 1, column 2. It's from column 2. And as I say, this last section asks, is it a range lookup? True will find the match within a range or an approximate match, whereas false will find an exact match. This is a true lookup because I'm looking for this test within a range. Okay, and there she is. So if you've got a B. When I drag that down, it will find the grading for each of those students. I can use exactly the same for test 2's results, and I can say equals VLOOKUP, lookup value, this cell here, table array, this range over here, returning from column 2, and it's a true lookup. Okay. So that's the VLOOKUP option. Now, if we were to go back to our list, after a VLOOKUP, we have to think about COUNTIF, SUMIF, nested if, and an OR ifs. So let's think about our ifs first of all, okay, or our COUNTIFs. I want to count the students who are in class A, or perhaps I want to add up the total value of all of the scores in class A. These are COUNTIF or SUMIF. So COUNTIF will count this range if the range matches the criteria that I'm asking. The SUMIF will add up the corresponding value if the criteria matches. So let's try that. Equals COUNTIF. So COUNTIF just needs one range and one criteria. The range is the group of cells that I want to count. The criteria is what I'm looking for. In this case, A. 4 students from class A. Okay. Now if I was to change that and I was to say SUMIF, I need 3 things. I need the range and the criteria, and then I need the sum range. The range and the criteria are exactly the same as the COUNTIF. Where am I looking? What am I looking for? And lastly, what do I want to add up? So it will only add up the corresponding cells if the previous cell is A. This is the range that I'm comparing. That's what I'm looking for, and that's what I want to add up. This is a SUMIF. Okay, so the total value of all of the students who are in class A got 35 in their scores. So now let's think about the actual if statement as far as pass or fail or whatever else is concerned. A basic if statement can ask one question and it can say value of true, value of false. So I could say, for example, equals if. If this test plus this test is greater than or equal to the pass mark, okay, so if this test plus this test is greater than or equal to G1, then return the value pass. Otherwise, return the value fail. I have speech marks around everything that's text. I have commas to separate the sections of my spreadsheet. I'm going to drag this down, so I want to lock my pass mark in place. I want these cells to move, but I don't want that cell to go anywhere, so I'm going to add my dollar symbol before and after the G. This student has passed. Let's drag it down. This student failed. Let's check. Got a 2 and a 5. So a 2 and a 5 together in a 7 and is not greater than 12. This student as well. Got a 3 and a 5. So a 3 and a 5 together is 8, is not greater than 12. So that's a basic if. So we'll carry on with the more complicated ifs in the second half of the same video.